medcram.com.
Welcome to another MedCram COVID-19 update. Here's the question that everyone seems to be asking, and that is, which booster should I take? Well, in true MedCram form, we're going to look at the data and make a decision. Recently, there's been a study that's come out that has not been published or peer-reviewed, but is on this preprint server that was conducted by a number of experienced researchers out of a number of universities across the country, and also in medical schools across the country, including the NIH, and also major hospital systems like Kaiser Permanente. And this study was performed in the United States, and it looks at just that question. So it takes a look at people who have been vaccinated with Moderna, people who have been vaccinated with Johnson & Johnson, and people who have been vaccinated with Pfizer, and they waited about 12 weeks, and they randomized them to receive a Moderna booster, a Johnson & Johnson booster, and a Pfizer booster in each one of these categories. There were about 50 in each of these groups, and they split it evenly so that 25 in each group was less than the age of 55, and 25 were greater than the age of 55. And as it turns out, there was 154 in the Moderna group, 150 in the Johnson & Johnson group, and 154 in the Pfizer group. So a total of 458 subjects in this study. And what these scientists wanted to ask is, what was the safety data like for each one of these categories? And what was the efficacy data like in terms of the ability to mount an antibody response? Well, let's take a look at the data. So let's look first at the safety data. And what we see here is we see the cohort that had Johnson & Johnson as the original vaccination, and then were boosted with the Moderna vaccine. But notice that in this study, they used the full dose Moderna vaccine because that's what they had available to them. Currently, though, if you were to go and get a booster shot with the Moderna vaccine, you would get the 50 microgram dose, or what is known as the half dose. Be aware of that. Moderna is the only one out of these three that have reduced the dosages for the booster shot. Also notice that there are three different colors here in terms of the graph. There is the light, which is mild. There is the darker, which is the amount of moderate reaction. And then there is the darkest, which is the most severe. So what we're going to do is we're going to look back and forth here at the different slides, because if you have had the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, we want to see how these side effect profiles look if you were to have the Moderna vaccine, if you were to have the Johnson & Johnson vaccine as a booster, or if you were to have the Pfizer vaccine as a booster. So this is what it looks like here. If you focus on this first box, is if you were Johnson & Johnson getting the Moderna booster. And this is what it would look like if you had Johnson & Johnson and gotten the Johnson & Johnson booster again as the second shot. You can see that there are a little bit more severe reactions here under malaise or fatigue. And the amount of pain and tenderness at the local site has gone up just a little bit, which is perfectly normal and acceptable for a vaccine side effect. And let's also remember that a lot of these symptoms are the results of the immune response that we're hoping to get with the vaccines in the first place. And here is the boosting with the Pfizer vaccine. You can see a little bit less in the way of severity, but still a little bit on the higher side. So not much difference in terms of which of the three would give you the more side effects. Okay, let's concentrate now on those that got Moderna as their original vaccination, and look and see what would happen if they got a booster with Moderna. You can see here that there is a side effect profile that you can see. There is more moderate symptoms here, as you can see with Moderna. What would happen if they got the Johnson & Johnson as a booster? Here you can see also some moderate side effects, especially in the headache, myalgia, and fatigue category. What about if Moderna patients got the Pfizer booster? And you can see here that there seems to be a little bit more mild reaction to those who get the Pfizer booster who had Moderna originally. Okay, let's finally look at those who got the Pfizer vaccine. In this case, those who got the Pfizer vaccine and get the Moderna boost, you can see that there is some side effects there in terms of moderate myalgia, malaise, headache, etc. When I say side effects, I'm referring to the effects that we would expect to have happen if somebody got a vaccine, but would be considered a negative on the face of it, but something completely expected in this case. For those who had the Pfizer vaccine and get the Johnson & Johnson booster, you can see that there's also a little bit higher levels in this area of malaise and headache, but not much different. And finally, those going for their third shot of Pfizer, that would be the Pfizer booster. For those that had Pfizer before, you can see here, again, a very similar type of profile. And while these symptoms after the vaccine boost were quite frequent, most, if not all of them, went away quite shortly after the boost. Now let's talk about efficacy. And here again, we're going to be looking at very similar types of situations. In this graph, we're looking at the IgG binding to S2PWA1, which is basically using spike protein as a surrogate for immunity. So in other words, what we're looking at here is how well do the antibodies, or the IgG that's made after the booster, how well does it bind the spike protein that we see in SARS-CoV-2? And in this case, it's a surrogate of the actual viral spike protein. So the higher the numbers here, the better the immune reaction from the booster shot. And what we're looking at here is looking at the amount of IgG binding on day one. So that's basically the baseline. And you can actually get a lot of information just by looking at all of these different day ones on all of these different graphs. And so what we have here is those with the Johnson & Johnson here in the first column getting a Moderna boost. Those here, Johnson & Johnson getting a Johnson & Johnson boost, and in the first column, Johnson & Johnson getting a Pfizer boost. But before we go to that, looking at the boost, let's just take a look at where things stand on the first day. You can see here that the antibodies from the Johnson & Johnson is considerably and consistently lower than the Moderna and or the Pfizer. And this goes along with what we've seen clinically in terms of prevention of hospitalization. So I do believe that this surrogate marker is actually predictive of clinical outcomes. So the higher this goes, potentially the better protection one would get from getting a booster. Also remember too that this scale here on the y-axis is logarithmic. So the higher up you go, the bigger the differences are. Now, again, I want you to remember that this is the full dose for Moderna, not the half dose that you might pick up when you went to go get your actual booster shot. Let's talk about what happens. So those who get the J&J shot, what happens when they get a Moderna booster? You can see that there's quite a rise in those antibodies. What happens when J&J gets a J&J booster? Not much of a rise in comparison to the full-dose Moderna. What happens when a Johnson & Johnson gets a Pfizer booster? You can see there that there is quite a bit of a jump. So I would say for a J&J person, they should either get the Moderna or the Pfizer booster. What about those that have Moderna to begin with? You can see here that out of all three, typically the Moderna recipients have the highest binding antibody levels. So the question is what happens when they get a booster of the three different types? A Moderna being boosted by a Moderna does go up even still. A Moderna going up with a Johnson & Johnson does actually go up. And if you compare the 29-day in both cases, it's actually not too different. A Moderna, however, being boosted with a Pfizer seems to go up even higher than either one. And the reason, again, why we don't have day 29 data on the Pfizer boost there on the far right is because this is a preliminary data release and that data has not yet come in. So one can make the judgment here that when you compare this to this one, even still, a Moderna vaccinated with a Moderna gives you the highest antibody levels anywhere on this chart. And so it could still be reasonably argued that even though you've had Moderna before and you're going to get a booster, it might be best to get Moderna for a third shot. But again, we're still missing this data. We don't know where this is going to go afterwards. Let's talk about those that have had the Pfizer vaccine. So those that had the Pfizer vaccine and get the Moderna do go up significantly. Here, those that get the Pfizer and boost with Johnson & Johnson don't seem to go up as much. And those that have the Pfizer and boost with the Pfizer do seem to go up as much as those with the boost for Moderna. Remember, we don't have some of this data, and also this is full dose that we're testing here, and what's actually available for a booster is the half dose. Another way of looking at this is looking at the neutralizing antibody titers in the same situations that we looked at before. And as you can see here, the results were nearly identical to looking at the IgG binding to the spike protein surrogate. So of note, if we're interested in looking at the efficacy of a booster on top of a fully vaccinated person, then the question is what does a randomized placebo-controlled trial show? And the results of such a randomized placebo-controlled trial was published as a press release on October 21st from Pfizer. This has not been peer-reviewed or published as yet, but Pfizer's record in terms of releasing data in press releases has been pretty good, and the numbers have turned out to be pretty accurate. So because of that, we share these numbers here. So what they basically did is they took fully vaccinated patients with 2 shots of the Pfizer vaccine, and there was about 10,000 subjects in this study, which was randomized 1-to-1 with a 3rd shot of the Pfizer vaccine and placebo. And the participants in this study were 16 years and older. And remember now, that's a little bit different than what the FDA recently allowed for boosters. But again, this is the trials, the phase 3 trials for the booster. And in terms of the ages, you probably want to know how many of these were in what age category. What they have told us is that the median age was 53 years of age, and that 23% of the people in this cohort were above the age of 65 years. Again, they've told us that there were 10,000 in this study, so we're assuming that there were about 5,000 in each arm since it was a 1-to-1 study. And they began looking for symptoms 7 days after the shot. They finally reached the endpoint in the study with 5 cases in the intervention group, the people that got the 3rd shot of the Pfizer vaccine, the booster, and there were 109 cases of symptomatic COVID in the placebo group. So again, we're looking for symptomatic COVID-19. And because of those cases, they're saying that there was a 95.6% efficacy of the vaccine to prevent symptomatic COVID-19 in patients who have already had 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine. Now, I'm going to make some assumptions here that if there were 5,000 in both groups and the mean follow-up time was about 2.5 months, which is important to understand. And that means if they had 5 cases in 5,000, that would mean that there was a 0.001 chance of having symptomatic COVID in the intervention group and about 0.0218 chances of having COVID with just 2 shots of the Pfizer vaccine. So you can see these are pretty low. Here you have a 1 in 1,000 chance as the absolute risk. And over here, you have about a 2% absolute risk. So the real key that we need to know in terms of the value of an intervention is what is the absolute risk reduction? The absolute risk reduction is simply 1 minus the other. And in that case, the absolute risk reduction is 0.0208. Now, you'll know from statistics that if you want to prevent one person from having symptomatic COVID-19, how many people need to get the booster to prevent one of those people from getting symptomatic COVID-19? That's known as the number needed to treat, or in this case, the number needed to vaccinate. And that's simply the reciprocal of the absolute risk reduction. And in this case, that's about 48. And to give you an idea of what this means, to prevent death in somebody with a stroke, TIA, or myocardial infarction, giving an aspirin to them daily, given to 67 people in fact, will prevent 1 death. And that's a little bit less effective than what we're seeing here in terms of the number of people that need to get 1 immunization to prevent one of these people from getting symptomatic COVID-19 is 48. That's actually not too bad. But remember, of course, that it actually could be even better than 48 because the follow-up time here was only 2.5 months. And I think most people agree that the vaccine shots, while we don't know how long they last, probably last longer than 2.5 months. It'll be interesting to see once this paper gets published and peer-reviewed what the final conclusions are. But I thought I'd bring this up in terms of the data out there and what it is looking like. Some might be wondering whether or not this has a higher effect in those that are older versus younger. Pfizer did say in the statement that multiple subgroup analysis of the efficacy were performed and there was no difference of other comorbidities. They also mentioned that the adverse events were consistent with all of the patterns that had been done before with the initial vaccination schedule. As always, there'll be more data to come and analyze. Thanks for joining us.